video recording. And also the okay, so can you see the broadcasting? Okay, good. Yes? Screen broadcasting? That both of you? Just this one? Can you change your position? Or I can actually do that again. Is it working now? Is it working now? No? They should be all the same, right? It looks like some of the why? So everyone is working, right?
Okay now.
It's okay now. Okay, good. So today we are going to teach the other very important package in R. It's called ggplot. Okay, dplyr is basically for data frame manipulation. Okay, ggplot is for data frame visualization. You want to visualize the content of data frame. Why? Why do we want to do visualization? As we can see that if we have a data frame, right? We have say this again and again, right? For every data frame, every record, every column actually represent a subject, right? It can be a product, it can be a company, it can be a customer, right? The subject of your interest, okay? So you want to kind of like map the subject into a graph so you can do comparison, right? So if I can, for example, if this data is customer data, So every record represents a customer. Okay? So when you project the customer into a space, then you can compare the attribute of the customer, right? So ggplot is kind of like a, map the data within the data frame into a graph, okay? And the way you do it is like it will use every role, every subject into a graphical element, okay? In this case, if we are doing this point chart, so every subject is represented by a point, okay? So if this is customer data, then every point is the customer. If this is a customer group, then every point is the customer group, okay? So when we project this customer or customer group into this space, then we can compare their attribute, right? For every customer or for every customer group, we can compare their, for example, their profit contribution, their revenue contribution. We can compare their margin, right? We can compare their total revenue contribution as well as their average, right? Their average contribution. So in order to do that, we actually kind of map the variables, map the attributes into the graphical attributes. We kind of map the data attributes in the data frame into the attribute of this graphical element. For example, I can have this x coordinate represent the total revenue, okay? And I can have the y coordinate represent the total frequency, isn't it? I can have the color, I can have the shape, right? Representing different attribute within this data frame, right? So ggplot is kind of like a tool like this, right? It maps a data frame into a graph, okay? And the way you do it is like, it kind of like map every subject into a graphical element, okay? And map every column, map every variable, okay, into the attribute of this graphical element, be that x coordinate, y coordinate, color, shape, right? After you do that, you can very easily compare, right? You can compare multiple attributes of multiple subjects in a single graph, right? Okay, I say it again. The purpose of ggplot is to map a data frame, map the data into a graph for easier comparison, okay? When you map the data frame into a graph, you can very easily compare multiple elements and multiple attributes in one graph, okay? Multiple elements, because every row is represented by a dot, by a point within this graph, okay? When I say multiple attribute, I mean that different column, right, is represented by x coordinate, y coordinate, color, shape, that type of thing, right? So in this way, you actually can represent the data into a graph so that you can compare the data visually. And this is called visualization. In this technique, we call visualization. And visualization is very, very useful for data exploration, right? If I give you a very large data frame, for example, I give you the customer data frame, and you have like 20,000 customers, right? And you have like 10 different attributes per customer. How can you compare them, right? If you want to do a multiple element and multiple attribute comparison, the best way to do that is to do graph, okay? And that's how that's the purpose of ggplot. Okay, so again, the ggplot has its own syntax. So, and the best way to learn the syntax is use example. Okay, so let's go to our notebook. Okay. In this week, oh, sorry. If you go to the Unit6 folder, there are two things, right? One of it is the PowerPoint file, and the other one is the zip file, right? So unzip this, download and unzip this zip file, and you will see three notebook file, and let's get started with the point, okay? The point RMD, and we can also open the point HTML. Okay? So the key point is in this notebook, we want to introduce the ggplot2 package and experience the power of data visualization. Okay? So as I told you, ggplot is a tool that visualizes data frame by mapping each row of a data frame into a plotting element, such as a point, right? Okay, and you can select some of this variable and map them into the attribute of this graphical element, be that x coordinate, y coordinate, color, or something like that. Okay. Now, the first example that I want to give you is actually a very simple example. In R, there is a built-in data called iris. Iris is a flower, it's a kind of flower. Okay. So let's take a look at the data first. The data look like this, okay? It's a data frame, okay? And every rows of the data frame represent a flower, okay? And there are a total of 150 flowers, okay? And this flower has 3 different species, okay? We can do a table. As you can see that there are 3 different species, and every species has 50 flowers, okay? And the data actually record the sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width. This is the attribute of the flower, right? So it record the flower, the length and width of petal and sepal for each flower, right? So if for some reason we want to, if I give you this data frame, and you actually cannot have a very good idea about you really don't have a holistic and systematic view of the entire data, right? By looking into this data, it's very difficult to have an idea about the size and shape of the data, of the flowers, right? So if we can visualize this data frame, it will make it a lot easier for us to have a better idea about the shape of the flowers, right? That the way to do it is to use the ggplot, package. So as we can see here, the way ggplot work is that first of all you need to call the ggplot function, right? The ggplot function would transfer a data frame into a graph, okay? And first of all you need to give it the data, right? This is the data frame, the name of the data frame, and then this green color text, green color code is actually the mapping, okay? It basically says that I want to map the sepal width into this column. I want to map sepal length as the y coordinate. I want to map sepal width as the x coordinate, okay? And I want to map species as color. So you can see that after specifying this data frame and also the mapping rule, you actually specify what type of graph you want to generate, okay? If we want to generate a point graph, we will use a geom point, okay? The geom point actually map every row, every record of the data. In this case, it represents every flower, right? Geom point, it means that I want to map every record into a point. Okay, so every point is a record which represents a flower, right? Okay, so in this graph, every point is a flower. And every point is a flower, and the points x coordinate, y coordinate, and color will represent the flower's sepal width, sepal length, and color. Get that? Okay, so in this way, you basically map the data frame into a graph, okay? See? And after you do that mapping, it's a lot easier, right? It's a lot easier to observe the data, isn't it? Right? So you can see the structure, right? You can see that this color, this Setosa color species, they have a larger sepal width but smaller sepal length, isn't it? Right? Because all of the Setosa flower, they are in this area, right? And in this, when they are in this area, we can tell that they have a smaller length and larger width sepal, right? Isn't it? So after transfer the data into a graph, it's a lot easier to see the whole picture of the data. So you can see the structure, you can see the relationship, right, within this data point. You get the point, you get the idea, right? Okay. So graph is very important in data analysis, right? As long as you can use graph, then basically you can kind of explore the data and catch the phenomenon, the trend, the structure within the data in a holistic and systematic way, right? It's very difficult to see the entire data, especially when the data is large, right? But in graph, it's a lot easier, a lot intuitive to do the comparison. See that? Okay. So this is how ggplot works, and how it can help us to do data exploration. Question? Okay. If no question, then let's move on. Okay. There's one thing that I have not explained in this slide. It's within this geom point, there are two other attributes, the size and the shape. Okay. Actually, some of the point has a lot of attribute, right? Besides x, y coordinate and color, you can actually map the size. You can actually map the size to a column, data column. You can actually map the shape to another data column. But in this case, we didn't do that. We kind of do this attribute is what we call a fixed attribute, which means that all of the point I want to have the same shape 18, which is this diamond shape, okay? And all the point I want to have the same size equal to 2, okay? Now, this type of attribute, this orange color code, it actually specifies the fixed attribute, fixed graphical attribute, okay? And if you want to map the graphical attribute into data, you need to put the attribute inside the AES function, okay? And if for some graphical attribute you don't want to change it, you can actually put it in the geom point, and you don't need to put that in AES. And in that case, the size is fixed. All of the points have the same size. All of the points have the same shape. Okay? It really depends on you, right? Okay? When we are doing visualization, it kind of there are some of the artistic, some of it's not just technology, right? There are some artistic choice, right? There are some aesthetic choice you can choose, okay? So doing visualization is not just technology, right? It takes experience, and it takes some artistic talent, right? So that you can map the data to the appropriate visualization attribute, okay? But however, this ggplot provides you the syntax with enough of flexibility so you can choose how to map your data as you wish, okay? I know that it's very difficult to remember everything in just one example, right? So let's do more example, and you'll get familiar with this way to explore data, okay? Now let's go back to our the following code chunk is basically just what I already explained, right? This is to load and see the data, right? This is just to see the data, and this is the syntax that we already done, right? Okay? So, and let's do more exercise, okay? Let's do more exercise. Let's go back to use the comic book, the comic character data set, okay? Still remember the comic book data set? Okay, so every record is a comic character, right? And the column is actually the characteristic of that character, right? Their sex, their eye color, their hair color, their line, right? Okay, so as we can see that we have 7,000 characters, and actually for every character we have 9 columns, right? 9 characteristics, okay? So if we want to compare this character, right, we can actually use graph to help us compare these characters, isn't it, right? So let's do that. Try to do that, right? If we map the ear and appearance as the X and Y axis, okay? So D this data frame has like 7,000 characters, okay? And for all of these 7,000 characters, I want to represent them, every character as a point, okay? And I want to use the year as the x coordinate and appearance, the number of appearance as the y coordinate, okay? And then this is chart. Pretty nice, isn't it, right? There will be one question, right? If there are like 7,000 points, and you put the 7,000 points into one graph, there will be a lot of overlay, right? If some of the points, they are overlaid in the same position, and you cannot see them, isn't it, right? And there are too many points, you can actually, the graph looks pretty, but actually, you cannot use the information, can you? Okay. For example, you know that the largest, the character that has the largest appearance has more than 4,000 appearance. Okay. You can see that the year of appearance is starting from like 1940 to 2010 something, right? But you really cannot see the detail about each point, right? Okay, you do not see what this point represent, isn't it, right? So if you simply use this ggplot, okay, sometimes you cannot see the detail of the data very well, okay? So let's do some more exercise. Now, before I go forward, you can see that in the year, actually it represents the x coordinate, appearance represents the y coordinate. And because in this AES function, the first and second position represent x and y, right? So you don't need to write this, okay? You can provide this argument by position. The first position is x, second position is y, okay? So so you don't put the x and y, you will have the same thing, right? You put them in, you will see that. Graph is the same, right? And as I say, when you have a lot of data, simply make a static graph will not help you too much, okay? So let's do some improvement, okay? There is an exercise here. I want you to following the code step by step and observe their effect, right? So the first thing is I want you to put in color equal to sex and shape equal to align into AES, okay? To add this code. Let's do it together because of time. So I add these two mapping, right? I want to map sex as color and shape as align, okay? So see, now if the align, the good, bad, and neutral is represented by a point, by a triangle, and also by a square, okay? And now the different color represent different sex. It's better, right? It's better. And then let's do the second improvement. I want you to do a scale y equal to log 10, okay? So far the scale is linear scale, right? But most of the people actually have a very little number of appearance, right? So when you have when you see the data and most of your data are like squeaks on one side of data, on one side of the graph, you sometimes want to like pull it up, right? So and we already learned that. Sorry. we already learned that when you use the log scale, it will kind of pull up the data, make it easier to observe, right? Let's see the effect. See that? Now the Y scale, it turned into the log 10, okay? So this is 1, this is 10, this is 100, this is 1,000, isn't it? Okay? It's easier to do comparison, right? Okay, to observe and do comparison. Okay, but still it's very messy, isn't it? Right? Looking at it, it's very difficult to use this data. Now I want you to add another. This ggplot, it actually use you can use this plus sign to add new graphical features into a graph. Okay, so this feature is actually let's see. See that? I actually split the graph into 2 panels, okay? And the left and right panel represent DC and marble. You see that? Okay? So you have DC in this side and marble in this side. You see that? Okay, this is how ggplot works, okay? Yes?
Does the plus sign and the pipe operator, are they both the same?
They are not the same. They are different syntax, right? Different package. They are using different syntax.
So in
The pipe, the pipe operator, it actually work with dplyr, right? So when you call different functions of dplyr, you pipe them together. Okay?
So it would not work here.
No, it will not work here. Okay. For ggplot, you need to use plus. Okay? You need to use the plus sign to add in graphical features. Okay? So, of course, ggplot has a lot of features. Okay? And we cannot cover them. I cannot cover everything in the classroom. Okay? So I'll try to like pick up the most important function of ggplot. Okay. Even we use it, even adding into all of these graphical features, it's still very difficult to observe the graph, isn't it? To use the graph, okay, for some practical reason, it's still not very useful, right? So here comes let's go back to. Here comes a very important point of visualization. Okay, so in visualization, actually, there is a key trade-off, right? In the one hand, we want to see the detail, right? In the other hand, we want to have a conciseness. Okay. On the one hand, we want to have a clear picture. Okay. On the other hand, we want to see the detail of the point. Okay. On the one hand, we want to see the structure on the chart. On the other hand, we want to see the detail. And that two things actually will conflict with each other, right? As you can see that if we this graph has a show the detail, right? But too much detail actually kind of like overflowed your visual perception, isn't it? Right? Yes, there are a lot of detail, but how can I use it? Okay. So the key, okay, the key to unlock, to have detail and conciseness together, is to have interactivity. Okay, and let's see another example. Okay. Okay, so now take a look at this chart. It is actually an interactive chart. See that? Okay, so let's see the function first before we look into the code. Okay, so if I move into each point, I can actually see that this man is actually Spider-Man. Okay, and I can see that this is the how to pronounce it? Wolverine. Okay, the Wolverine. Okay, so if you have interactivity of the graph, it's actually very, very important. Okay, the interactivity is not just here. You can actually, for example, if I only interest in bad mail, I can double click it. So only the bad mail is selected. Okay. If I want to see a good female, I can actually, I double click this point. I can see this is the good female, right? So I can very easy to share to see that the most of the good female actually for DC appear in this period, right? And most of the good female for Marvel actually appear in this area. I can see that for all of the good female who has the largest number of appearance is this one. Okay, I can see that the first appeared good female is this guy, right? Louis Lane, isn't it? Okay, so interactivity is very important, right? If you have a lot of data and you squeeze all of the data into a graph, you will need to have interactivity before you can use the graph for communication, isn't it? Right? So it's already 10 o'clock. So let's take a break, and after break, let's see how we make the plot interactive. Okay? Let's take a 10 minutes break.